All right, I'm going to get into the...
Be professional.
Come on, man.
Sorry, it's my first week.
You had one job. Welcome back to the Saltlick Sessions podcast. Today is going to be a little different in that we brought on a guest, and depending on how you look at it, could potentially change your life from a monetary perspective. And before everybody panics, no, we didn't bring in a crypto guy, and no, Captain Murray didn't find another can't-miss offshore investment opportunity. No, see, this one's actually about wildlife, land, habitat, and how all of that can actually make financial sense. Which is why Murray and I have been looking forward to this ever since we met these guys at Safari Club International Convention in Nashville. And it's a really cool angle, and it's way outside our normal, tell hunting stories and roast each other lane kind of thing. But as always, joining me, we've got Captain Mike Murray, we've got Oscar Maldonado, and today we've got Mr. Brian Gilroy from Wildlife Partners. This one's going to be different, but it's going to be good. With that said, let's get into it. Brian, welcome to the Saltlick Sessions podcast.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Saltlick Worldwide podcast, your ultimate destination for hunting, fishing, conservation, and gear. From international hotspots to the backwoods of America, we bring you the real stories, raw opinions, and the conversations others won't have. Buckle up. The adventure starts now. Man, I managed to rattle that thing off without screwing up.
It was amazing. It was amazing. I'm going to bring a little plastic trophy for you next week.
You got to use spell check, dude.
Yeah. I don't think it does that. Listen, it's amazing that I managed that. So Brian, to kind of kick things off, you've got kind of a unique story. You didn't come up through the usual wildlife world pipeline. If you don't mind, could you give people a little bit of the backstory, the who you are and what you did before this?
Sure. Yeah. I did, I grew up here in Texas. I guess you could say more fishing than hunting. I did get into hunting a little later in my teenage years just because I had friends that had some property and they would take me out goofing off and all that sort of stuff. But I have grown up anything from the traditional sense of you're supposed to do it this way. If there was a rule, I probably broke it. But I, was not very good at school. Found out pretty early on that I liked money more than I liked school. And I liked not sitting inside more than I liked being inside. So my road is really involved doing everything probably the exact opposite of the way you're supposed to do it. But somehow I landed here, and the evolution of things was I did not finish high school. I gave a quick stab at college after getting a GED and discovered once again I really didn't like school. So I just got into working, and I fell into a sales career very early on, and was actually quite good at sales, but never imagined I would end up going down the road of, breeding exotic wildlife from all over the world. So where I started with improvements, I was the typical tin man knocking on the door, trying to sell you some siding and windows. Did that for a few years, and then I managed to get into the financial services industry when I was 23. I got a securities license and became licensed with, at the time, was NASD, which today is FINRA. And that led me to a focus on a career that really had a lot of, it's really built around investing in things that were favored from a tax standpoint. I was mainly involved in oil and gas for the first 20 years of my career. And then I wandered into the exotic wildlife industry because I was personally looking for some tax deductions. And I had a CPA that recommended I do this. So that's kind of how I ended up in the wildlife space. It really doesn't have there's not really an easy bridge to cross over. They're vastly different from one another. But, I'd love to say that the story was wonderful and colorful and great, but I just happen to be a pretty good salesman. That's really the end of the story.
Oh, so tell me, how did this, from a wildlife perspective, you kind of started as, an offshoot or a little niche that you were working on. How did that become your primary business? I mean, you dipped your toe in it and then all of a sudden went full on, or did this, kind of evolve over several years?
I quit hunting when I got married. My first wife was kind of anti-hunting, so I didn't hunt a whole lot.
Got rid of her,
I
didn't
started
you?
to become,
Sorry.
I did actually. I told
Here's to our first exes.
when I first got divorced, I told my buddy who kind of introduced me to the exotic wildlife hunting world. I said to him, I'm going to make it through this divorce, but there's a whole lot of animals that aren't. And
There's a clip.
I spent a year pulling the trigger, and that's really what introduced me to the exotic wildlife industry. So my buddy, as a way of giving me a shoulder to cry on, took me out to a ranch called Rattlesnake Springs and put a gun in my hand, and I started slinging lead. And I had no idea that there was actually an industry around exotic wildlife, even though I grew up in Texas, very near the hill country, which is really the epicenter of the exotic wildlife world. I was oblivious that this even existed. It was the farthest thing from my mind. And so until I started pulling the trigger, I didn't know anything about this. So my entrance into this was the same way I think most people get involved in it. You get involved as a hunter, and that's really where I started. So I can tell you some pretty wild and crazy hunting stories that aren't going to make very good TV, but we did some really stupid stuff. If you could all,
Well, we're all laughing behind the camera because what you were just explaining is exactly what I went through 3 years ago, and
really,
Oh yeah.
I went off the deep end. I didn't do it in Texas though. I went to Africa and just didn't come home.
He dragged me with him. Same scenario.
sounds like a great friend.
It's a winning equation. It absolutely worked.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how to write that off. That got expensive in a hurry, by the way.
I couldn't tell you how much money I spent hunting, but it was a lot, and it was the easiest way for me to distract myself from the shit that was going on in life.
Amen.
Yeah, it really it opened my eyes to what has turned out to be kind of a life-changing experience, and realizing this unbelievably incredible industry exists. But the first pull of the trigger was a black buck, and I hadn't shot a gun in quite some time, and I didn't make a very clean shot. So um, yeah, I'm not going to go into any great detail about how we managed to finish that, but I started with a black buck, and I ended up with 5,000 animals. So it's I always tell people, I always tell people, when you get into the exotic wildlife business, everybody starts with axis and black buck, which it's the gateway drug. You're going to be smoking bongo crack before you know it.
Oscar already is.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I tell Gabby all the time. Every single time we've been great. Lucky enough to go to Africa a couple times now, but every time we go, the GDP of that country must go up
Especially with
a
our
couple
groups.
of percent.
Brother, you're talking to a guy that's been over a couple of dozen times now. Yeah, I get it. Trust me. This crate alone's got 47 animals in it. So yeah, that got a little crazy. But Brian,
That was a fun trip.
yeah, oh man, and it is, and I love that country, and that's one of the things that kind of when I started seeing your content and when you were talking about, I can absolutely relate. I kind of speak the language, and plus I've been super fortunate over the past several years in that I've built relationships in Africa, and I know personally lots of game breeders. I've visited their ranches. I've seen how the industry works. I've been to auctions, so I've seen it from a South African perspective. And for whatever reason, until I knew it was here a little bit, and I know, there's some ranches that, they'll have a kudu here, a bongo there out in Texas kind of thing. I had no idea that it was as big as it is, and the potential to make money and essentially, skim some off the backside from a tax perspective, so I don't have to give it to Uncle Sam. And that's what's really intriguing to me.
I have to, the saying of know the room. My nature is I'm an unpolished redneck that likes to get out and goof off and have a good time with the boys and talk trash and sling lead. That's really where I am in my core. In fact, I don't even have shoes on right now. But
That's great. I'm not wearing underwear, so
Yeah.
We are all kin in this room, and
Yeah. Yeah. But the deal is the industry that I'm a part of, and frankly, the industry that I'm leading puts me in a place where I have to be somewhat polished at times. So I wear this beard just to remind people that although I might be able to sound polished, I'm really just a redneck having a good time. And I've learned a little bit about the tax code, and I've learned a little bit about business, and it's allowed me to take something that I just love, I'm super passionate about, that historically is just a hobby for people. And I've turned it into this really super cool business that's built, we've accumulated a lot of assets doing this. But it's, at the core, I'm just a kid having a blast doing what I love. The tax side of it is something that I've just found this great opportunity in, and it's allowed us to really build on the industry because there was a lot of untapped potential. But I can put myself in a position where I can be very polished with CPAs and attorneys or financial planners or whoever. But what I really love is I love wildlife. I love the animals. I love the outdoors. I love hunting and fishing. And the fact that I've managed to turn it into a career has just been pretty remarkable. It's been a true blessing.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
that's so cool.
Well, if you could kind of give us we kind of jumped into this, which is what we normally do head first, before explaining to the audience exactly what the hell we're doing here. So, could you kind of dumb it down for me a little bit, just plain English? What is Wildlife Partners? Breeder, broker, ranch services company, investment platform, tax strategy vehicle, conservation, all of the above. Can you kind of give me from a 5,000 foot view down?
Man, that was a lot.
It was.
I mean,
I've researched a little bit. I mean,
yeah, you just threw the kitchen sink at me. So, yeah, so I'll back up a little bit. So, in my background in financial services, what I did is I raised money for oil and gas projects. And the way an oil and gas project is structured is, there's some guy that has an idea to go out and drill an oil and gas well, and then there's a group that goes out and raises the money for that. And so the group that raises the money for it does a pretty good job of telling the story, but they make a little bit of money for raising the money, but then they keep a piece of the action. They're keeping a piece of that well. And so the reason I'm describing this is because it's technically exactly what I did in the wildlife space. So in the oil and gas business, you're drilling a well and you're spending all your money, and there's nothing there to show for it other than a hole in the ground. And you're hoping that something is going to come out of the ground. And the IRS is nice enough to the oil and gas industry that they allow them to write all of that off against active income. So there's active versus passive income, which you may or may not know about. But um, getting a deduction from an investment that you make against active income when you're not the one operating it is an incentive that draws people into the oil and gas industry. So someone may invest 100 grand into an oil and gas well. They're going to get a write-off of about 75 or $85,000 in the year that they make the investment, right? And why do they do it? Well, they do it because the excitement of drilling a well. They do it because they feel like they're getting over on the IRS, and they do it because they want to make money. But if you don't find oil, you don't make any money. You just have a hole in the ground. And what I figured out about exotic wildlife is that most people 10 years ago did not understand that under the tax code, a bongo, a sable, a kudu, an eland, a Grant's gazelle, a Grevy zebra, all of these animals are exactly the same as a printing press or a computer or a truck or a backhoe or a bobcat, a Kubota. They are designated exactly the same. They're business equipment. And because they're business equipment, you get to depreciate them. And beginning in really around 2000, we started to see accelerated depreciation. So rather than having to do it over 5 years or 7 years, when I started doing this, you got to write them off 50% in the first year. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, I get to buy this thing that is not going to go away. It's still there. And I get to write it off 50% in the first year and the rest over 5 years. Well, that's a pretty good deal. And, so I started buying animals purely because I wanted the tax write-offs. And there was a very specific day where my mind changed, and it was I was driving through the ranch and I had bought some sable, and there were two cows out in the pasture. And back at that time, if you wanted to buy a great big bull, they made you buy females. The market was not very developed. Females were kind of a nuisance. People weren't really, you don't shoot the females. So everything was hunting centric at that time. So if you bought a great big male, they made you buy the females. So I had these two female sable, and I was driving through the ranch, and I looked over and there was a baby sitting next to one of them. And I had paid like, I don't know, $6,000 for these sable. And I thought to myself, well, that's 6 grand that just fell out of her. And I started thinking about all these females I had, and it dawned on me that these were better than oil wells. Not only was I getting a deduction for buying them, but they would have a baby, and I didn't have to wonder whether I was going to find a barrel of oil or not. It was guaranteed. As long as they were fertile, I would get a baby out of them that would make me money. So that was around 2013. And so between 2013 and 2016, I just did this myself. I did it, as a personal investment. I did it to acquire some real estate, and I did really well. I ended up making a fair amount of money while I was doing that. But what I really did is I learned about the industry, and I went to South Africa, like you described, and I went and visited breeders there. I visited Richard Morton, and I met Norman Adamy and all the guys of the Stud Game Breeders Group. And I told my buddies at the time, I said, I am going to bring what they're doing in Africa to Texas. I'm going to make that happen here. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but with my background in finance and deal structure in oil and gas and understanding how the tax code worked, I realized I could put this thing together in a way where just maybe people would invest in it. And so that's what I did. In 2016, I started Wildlife Partners, and my brother and I put this deal together, and we went on the road. And 30 days later, these unsuspecting people had given us $5 million, and we didn't have anything to show for it other than a good story. And we took that $5 million and we went out and we started buying animals. And that was our first program. And so what that was, it was a $5 million LLC. The people invested in that in 2016. They got a 50% write-off in the first year. And they believed that those animals would have babies and that they would make money and it would turn out great. And ultimately it did. But that led itself into today. I've done 23 or 25 of those partnerships. Today they're $11 million versus 5. I don't raise the money for those myself. There's a group of financial services firms around the country that raise all the capital for us. But we raise about 25 million a year for those investments. And then in order to get the animals for all these partnerships, I had to get them from somewhere. So we started building relationships with landowners in Texas. And so today we work with about 1,000 landowners in Texas. We do a lot for them. We don't just buy animals from them. We sell them animals. We buy animals from them. We do tax consult on how to build their pens, feed regimens, proper carrying capacity. We're basically a lock, stock, and barrel, start to finish, every single step of the way on how a Texas landowner can get involved in the industry and do it successfully, where the IRS recognizes them as a business, but they're getting to do this thing that's super cool. And it's done us a huge favor. So in 2017, all of this became 100% tax deductible. And then in last year, when the big, beautiful bill passed, it all became tax deductible once again. So today, our advantages are actually better than the oil and gas industry. We get to write off 100% of the cost of every animal we buy, plus all of the operating overhead, plus all of the infrastructure that exists on our real estate, or all infrastructure that we build. We get 100% deduction the year we do it with no limit. So it's the business is built upon a handful of different things. It's a love of the outdoors. It's a love of wildlife. It's a love of hunting. But if we didn't have the financial model that is built around the tax strategy and revenue generation, it would never have been scalable. We wouldn't able to build it into what we built today.
That's
It's a lot.
That's a lot. That's
Yeah, I
pretty
know.
incredible.
I know.
Now, I may be one of the only people in the world, or maybe there's a handful of us, but I read the tax code every single year. I love it. I love tax strategy.
you just said that on the air.
Nerd.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's fun. It's fun to me. Okay. Basically, so in my opinion, would be the tax code basically is there's benefits for buying a house, and you can like the government's trying to incentivize you to get something, and then they get like and they give you a tax benefit. So if you have a kid, you can, there's a child tax credit, you buy a house, you can mortgage. Now, I know oil and gas is one of the few investments you can do that. How does it work with the exotic animal, like I don't know, industry? Like what part of the tax code is it?
It's section 179 and 168K. But I want to really touch on something you said, because I look, I'm the same. I read legislation. So as taxes are evolving through legislation, I read the legislation as it's kind of passing through the House and the Senate. So why do I do that? So I'm going to give Robert Kiyosaki a plug. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read the book when I was a teenager. And one of the things he talks about pretty frequently is that, tax is your biggest bill. They're going to take more money from you than anything else you do. And law is something you need to understand, because we live in a litigious society. And if you don't understand the law, you're not going to be able to make it work for you. And so I've spent a lot of time studying the tax code, and what I've learned about it, going into exactly what you're saying. This is the government's tool for doing a number of different things. Obviously, it's revenue generation to the government, but it's also the way that the government can influence the economy. If we want more oil and gas, well, let's give more oil and gas deductions. If we want farmers to do something, let's give farmers certain benefits. If we want manufacturers to do things, well, then let's create certain incentives for them. And so
more kids, more kids, buy more EVs. That's why there's an EV.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk got $600 million or something as the initial seed capital from the federal government to build Tesla. And so the government plugs money via tax incentives into all sorts of different industries. I will say they did not intend to do that to the exotic wildlife industry. That was not their intention. The changes in depreciation is the reason why this has all been so beneficial for our industry. So, as I said, livestock under the tax code is designated as business equipment, and that's the result of the cattle lobby. The cattle lobby has gone out. They've lobbied the federal government to create legislation so that if you're a cattle guy, when you buy cows, you don't have to depreciate them over 5 years. They get treated just like any other business equipment. And so cows are tax deductible as business equipment, and historical, the schedule's 5 years. But because of bonus depreciation allowing us to accelerate over a period of time, or accelerate over 1 year versus a period of time, that is what has driven our industry. But look, that's what's driven airplanes. It's what has driven buying ATVs. It's cars, trucks. Right now, what is it? Interest on American-made cars is now tax deductible. So these incentives that get put into the tax code, I don't want to say collateral damage, but there's collateral benefactors. And the exotic wildlife industry and wildlife conservation is the benefactor of tax incentives that are designed for job creation in small businesses throughout the United States. That's really where this comes from. There's no special provision in the federal tax code that says if you buy a Grevy zebra, you're going to get a special tax deduction. what you're getting is you're getting the same tax deduction as any cattle rancher, a sheep farmer, a goat farmer, chicken farmer. You're getting to write these animals off because the federal government allows livestock to be written off. So section 179, which is related to depreciation, and then 168K, which is related to bonus depreciation. And that may have changed since the bill, but I think it's still the same. But the other thing I'll add to this is that, I remind people all the time, the tax code is written to benefit business owners. It's not written to benefit W-2 taxpayers.
Correct.
W-2 taxpayers under the big beautiful bill, they're limited to $615,000 of income or deductions against non-business income. So if you make $10 million as a W-2 income earner, which I don't think any of us fit into that category, but if you did, you could only take $600,000 of losses from an LLC or other pass-through entities. So this stuff is really advantageous for people that own businesses. And when you own a wildlife bona fide breeding business, it becomes very advantageous because it all flows through to your other income from, let's say, a construction company or an engineering company or whatever kind of business you might have. So the tax code benefit that you're asking about, it's business equipment and it's bonus depreciation.
Well, you put it like that, it makes perfect sense, right? Livestock doesn't matter if it's black and white stripes.
Yahtzee. That's what I get.
So basically, from what I'm understanding, is that you found inside the tax code that a provision that was meant to help farmers, cattle farmers, as it reads, it's just livestock, and then there's no law that says there's no difference between a Brahman bull and a bongo.
Well, in Texas, there's actually a very specific law written into the ag code. So in the ag code, it describes livestock, and they designate not two different kinds, but there's categories. There's livestock, which is your traditional livestock, and then there is exotic livestock. So exotic livestock is antelope, which include kudu, bongo, sable, elk, all sorts of stuff that's non-native to Texas. In our ag code in the state of Texas, these are specifically designated as the exact same thing as a cow. So under the definition at the state level, they have actually parsed it out and identified that this is in fact exotic livestock, which falls under the definition of livestock. At the federal level, I have not read this. My CPA is basically the one that gave me this definition, but according to him, the definition of livestock at the federal level is that it has ears. Seems kind of ridiculous to me, but that's his version of the story. So, I don't know if that's true or not, but what I can tell you is, bongo, kudu, sable, dama gazelles, zebras, giraffe, Cape buffalo, all of these animals, they are exactly the same as a cow. There's no different. They're exactly the same.
Are you aware of? Is it the same here in Florida? Because we have quite a ranching industry here as well, and there's actually there's a fair amount of exotic game ranches here. I don't know about breeding, but
yeah, there are. I actually deal with quite a few people in Florida. So at the state level, doesn't matter when you're talking about federal income tax. So where it matters, at the state level here is that there's other laws related to animal health and animal movement and things like that. And Florida has some very strict laws as well on importation and licensing. And, you have to have a license in the state of Florida to own exotic wildlife. You do not have to have a license in the state of Texas for that. So when it comes to taxes, the only thing that matters is the federal law. The state law is kind of irrelevant.
sure.
It's just the red tape you got to cut through to get it.
More a licensing thing here. Yeah.
So,
And the licensing in Florida is not hard to get. It's got some nuance to it that's kind of silly. I mean, they separate dangerous game from non-dangerous game, and there is no rhyme or reason to what they classify as dangerous. Like, as I understand it, they classify a wildebeest as dangerous game. I don't know why they would do that, but apparently they do. So there's a Class A and a Class B, and I think a Class C license. But I've never seen anybody have a difficult time getting a license to breed exotic wildlife.
Do, I'm sorry, my the wheels are
I
spinning right
know.
now. This so your company.
So let
I'm
me
sorry.
interrupt you.
Yes, please.
So do you want to know where all these animals came from?
Absolutely.
This is like one of the greatest parts of this industry that nobody ever wants to talk about.
Hit
No,
me
really.
with it.
No, so here's the deal. So I look, I'm a very confrontational person, and I walked, I, yeah, well, I am. So I walked into, I walked into this industry knowing that I was going to ruffle a lot of feathers, knowing that I was going to piss some people off. And frankly, I just didn't care. I knew there was opportunity and I was going to pursue it. And so, I get my feelings hurt like anybody, but I've got pretty thick skin. So when I got into this, one of the things that I started to realize is there's no animals being imported into the United States. So you can't import these things from Africa. There were two things I saw about this industry when I jumped in it. Well, one of them is everybody around the world thought this industry in Texas was about one thing. It was about canned hunting. It was some, Billy Bob Bubba from Houston in the oil and gas industry, going out and walking up to, a scimitar oryx, and there was this helpless little animal there, and he was shooting it in a 5-acre pen. That's what the world thought about this industry 10 years ago. The other thing is that there was this belief that there was some, oil guy from Houston or Dallas that just had all this money that was importing these poor innocent animals from the wild in Africa, putting them on ships and planes and bringing them to Texas and then shooting them. And none of that's true. Like, none of that's true at all. These animals originate from zoos. So when you go to Disney Animal Kingdom, those little babies you see running around, well, they don't want to tell you, but those animals end up in Texas. When you go to Busch Gardens, those little animals you see running around, they end up in Texas. So since the 1950s, zoos across the United States, they had been breeding animals because it's not easy to import them and they need genetic diversity. So they swap animals all over the country. And then when they have an animal that's overrepresented or they don't need it anymore, they have to get rid of it. And so what do? Well, in the middle of the night, they sneak it onto a guy's trailer out the back door and they bring it to Texas and they unload it on somebody's ranch. And there's this secretive little network there within the zoo community where this happens. And so and I will say all of the animals that exist here in Texas are the lineage of the animals that you're looking at when you go to zoos across the United States. San Diego Wild Animal Park, they were one of the biggest contributors. San Diego Zoo, San Antonio Zoo. It is literally every zoo across the United States that is an AZA zoo. And AZA is anything but a conservative organization. They're anything but pro-hunting. They're anything but pro-Texas. They're anything but pro-ownership or pro-private ownership. The story that they tell, as you can imagine, is vastly different than the world that I'm from. But yet, they're the reasons that we're here. They are look. There's animals coming from zoos in the United States today, yesterday, the day before. This is easily accessible through importation records when you do a Freedom of Information Act request on any state. You can see the inflow of these animals. So that was one of the biggest shockers to me, was that the people that quote unquote hate us are the people that created us. This industry was born from people that are anti-private ownership. They're quasi-animal rights activists. They're extraordinarily liberal. And look, no offense to the liberals, but they're anti-hunting is what they are. But yet they not only have been shipping us animals for 70 years, they're still doing it today.
That's pretty
Right
wild.
now. Yeah.
I believe they call it hypocrisy.
I believe so. Well, Brian, that absolutely just
That's crazy.
blew my mind. I'm going to be honest with you. I had no idea. So, I've got several friends in the industry, mostly on the outfitter side, big ranches here in South Florida, relatively close to where we are right now. And I'd never had a conversation where the animals came from. I just assumed, somebody darted them, threw them on a boat and brought them here. Right. But so that for whatever reason and then from the continuation of breeding and genetics, my assumption was, all right, well, they got some in here years and years ago, and now to diversify the animals that they've got, they're buying straws or something else from South Africa or Namibia or places like that. I had no idea.
Yeah. So look, I've spent a lot of time in this area that we're talking about. And the reason I did is I wanted to understand the genetic background of the animals that I'm breeding. I wanted to understand where they came from, what their history was. And as I got into it, it just became like the most fascinating thing in the world. And it was like I was reading a freaking mystery novel. There's been this, you could you could call it wildlife trafficking that's been going on in this. Well, that's what it is. I mean, look, I'll give you a couple tidbits on this, which is fascinating. So, if you were to go to Zoo Miami is a nonprofit organization. Okay, yeah, it's a great zoo, right? Cool zoo. So, nonprofit organization. If you go get their financial statement and you look at their financial statement, what's the biggest asset Zoo Miami owns? I'll give you a hint. They have like legs and wings and beaks and like
Macaw.
So-
Is it macaws?
it's animals.
Oh, just animals. Damn, I got it wrong.
Yeah, animals is the biggest asset that Zoo Miami owns, right?
Macaws
And
don't
so
have
if you
ears.
go look at, if you actually they have little holes. They have little holes. They're not mouse's ears. They're little bird
Well, listen,
ears.
I'm not here to argue semantics.
Yeah. So if you look at their balance sheet, right, and you go look and say, okay, well, hey, what's Zoo Miami's biggest asset? Guess what's not on the balance sheet? Animals. They're not there. They don't exist. And the reason that they don't exist is because around the 1970s, the AZA decided we don't want to put a monetary value on an animal because it's not nice. It's not cool to put a monetary value on an animal. So what they did is they removed the most valuable asset from the balance sheet. So when you look at the Zoo Miami and you look at the executive director, well, the executive director is running the zoo off the balance sheet and the P&L, and he's out raising money off the balance sheet and the P&L. And the board of directors, which are volunteers in most cases, which has got an executive committee, they're running the zoo off of the balance sheet and the P&L, right? But they have no oversight of the collection of animals. So who's in charge of that? And it's the curators. It's the people working in the zoo. They're in charge of it. They're making all the decisions. And the AZA created this policy. I got one right here. So this is actually for Eastern Bongo. There you go. This is the book from AZA. What this is, it's called a stud book, and it's called a species survival plan. Doesn't that sound cool? Species survival plan.
Sounds like
Right,
something
so-
a liberal wrote.
Yeah. So I'll tell.
That's useful for a rancher, right?
It's brilliant.
That's what you need to
Yeah.
use.
Well. So what that is that's the history of every bongo that's ever existed in the AZA, and the AZA mandated. They created a rule, and the rule is, if you're going to be an AZA member, you have to incorporate DEI. Oh, never mind. I didn't mean to say that. Yeah. Actually, that's a true story today.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're going to be a member of AZA today, you're mandated to incorporate DEI into your policies. That's mandated today. Okay. So, but the same organization that we're talking about mandated that if you're an AZA member, you have to take your assets that you own and you have to pony them up and you have to share them with every other zoo in America that's an AZA member. And you have to do this because we have to make sure that our species survive. Because if they want to have bongo in the zoo, they can't import them, so they have to breed them amongst each other. So there's this network of movement where animals are being moved from Busch Gardens or from Zoo Miami, and they're moving them to Denver, or they're moving them to San Diego, or they're moving them to San Antonio or the Bronx or wherever. So you have this movement of animals all over the country for the purpose of genetic diversity. That's the purpose to this, right? And so when there's someone put in charge of that, that's what's called the species survival coordinator, the SSP coordinator. So I'm getting in the weeds on this a little bit, but this is a person. Let's say there's 100 bongo in all of the AZA zoos. There's one person that works at St. Louis Zoo that's responsible for deciding what every bongo in all of the AZA what happens to all of them. So if that person says, hey, we're going to get rid of these 10, you as a zoo in Miami are required to do that. You have to give them away. You have to do something to get rid of them. They're no longer allowed to be in the plant. And so this is generally a employee that's making $40,000 or $50,000 a year, but they're controlling this collection of animals that's worth $1 gazillion. And so when they make a decision to send those animals somewhere, who do you think they send them to?
Well, I think it's Texas now.
Well, but there's a person in the middle. There's a private party in the middle of that transaction. There's a guy that shows up in the middle of the night at the zoo and loads those animals on his trailer for free. I said it, for free.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Right? So this is $100,000 animal going on a trailer to a guy for free. And that animal comes to Texas and gets sold here. So do you think maybe there's the potential for some things going on that maybe shouldn't be?
That's got shady written all
Sounds like
over it.
organized crime to me.
That is exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And
So the zoos are, the reason they're not as listed as an asset then is, as I can understand this, I think, is that they're donating these animals. So saying get rid of them, they're giving them away. So there's no transaction there.
Yeah, but how does a nonprofit organization donate something to a for-profit enterprise?
Oh, I don't know that answer. Yeah,
well, it's called excess. It's called excess benefit, and it's illegal.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a museum giving away a Rembrandt painting to somebody in the private sector just for free?
Sure. No, I get it.
You're up to your ass in Rembrandt, so.
Yeah. So you're not allowed to do this. So look, to kind of wrap this part of this up. So I've confronted this subject matter at the AZA level. I've been to DC. I've sat down in their corporate offices. I sat down with their executive director. I've been to the board of directors meetings. I've gone to zoos all over America and met with executive directors. I've met with the boards of zoos, and I've presented this issue in front of them. And I've said, you guys have no oversight over any of this. Meanwhile, you've created this beautiful conservation story. Why don't you guys get some oversight and learn how to tell this story in a positive way? Why don't you learn how to tell this story as the AZA did this remarkable thing of building this huge industry in Texas that's resulted in all of these species that would have been extinct now thriving? Why don't you guys own that label? But they don't want to own it. They want to live in the dark, and they don't want to embrace you and I. They don't want to wrap their arms around us. And so what they do is they keep doing it in the middle of the night. And I'm grateful. Look, I'm glad that the animals come here, but at the end of the day, we have this really strange, awkward relationship with this group that says that they oppose us. They're anti-hunting. They don't like what we're doing, but yet they have no choice but to send us the animals or euthanize them.
Wow.
Either euthanize them or send them to us. And so that's how our industry got built. And that's how our industry continues to get, we don't really need new blood from them anymore, but the flow of animals does not stop. And look, There's multiple places there in Florida that are a part of all this. This is not isolated to one little area in the country. It's every single AZA zoo in America does this.
So I have a question. So these midnight transporters, they obviously, there's obviously more than one, and is that who the ranchers are buying animals from? I mean, is that literally the middleman, or is it?
It's so funny. You're gonna love this, really. So you used the word organized crime a minute ago. So here's how it works, right? So there's this guy. I'm not going to use his name. There's about 10 of them. Okay, and these 10 guys, they sign an agreement with the zoo, and the agreement is, I won't sell the animal at an auction, and I won't sell the animal to a hunting ranch. That's the agreement they sign. And then what the zoo does is they enter into the record the acronym LTF. And LTF stands for lost to follow up. So once that guy signs that agreement and they give him that animal, they enter LTF. In other words, I was going to use a colorful word, but I won't. They just say, to hell with it. We're not going to care anymore. We're not even going to follow up. We're not going to pay any attention. It's over with. It's out of our hands. It's off our books. We don't have to worry about it anymore. So they put lost to follow up in the stud book, and it's gone. So from there, that guy has a handful of people that he washes these animals with. He doesn't sell them directly to the landowner. What he does is he sells them to another party, and that party then goes and sells them to the Texas landowner. So there's generally, 2 to 3 people involved in the transaction before it ends up on a Texas ranch.
Wow. Yeah, it's even more like organized crime.
It isn't more like it. It is.
It is. Yeah,
that is what it is.
It's an animal laundering business.
It would make a great movie.
Yeah.
So the zoo says to everybody, this is the endangered whatever animal. That female drops a calf or whatever and everything. And then some guy picks up that endangered animal
for nothing,
for $0, gives it to another guy.
No, he doesn't give it.
Sells it to another guy, a non-hunter, and then
that guy sells it to the.
And then that guy can do whatever he wants with it because he paid for it.
So I have a question.
I've got lots of questions.
Yeah.
And then people go to these zoos and be like, "This is the endangered whatever. There's only a couple thousand of these left in the world." But a calf just got dropped off at a Texas ranch.
Sure.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Seems legit.
Well, they don't know that. They have plausible deniability.
Yeah, because they're what?
They don't actually, and I'll tell you why. Because it's all documented in this book. They create the record of their transactions. It's all in these books, and I have 100 and something of these books for every species that we breed. So they document it in their own books. And what I've noticed is over the last couple of years, they're deleting the history from these books. But fortunately, I printed all of them about 8 years ago. But they've been making a practice of deleting all of the history and only leaving 5 or 6, 7 years backwards in. And so if you go look these books up today on the internet, you can't look them up because you don't have access to them, but I can. You will no longer see the entire set of data. You'll only see parts of it. But I printed all of them. So yeah, they've made their own record.
So that leads me to the question I was going to ask. How are prices established? Is there some sort of standard? Is there some sort of black book that says that a bongo is worth this, a kudu is this, a blue wildebeest is this?
That question on its face seems like it would be easy to answer, but it's no different with how is the price of Tesla stock decided? And the answer is that the market decides that.
Supply and demand.
It may have some relationship with enterprise value, or it may have some relationship to revenue or contracts or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's supply and demand. And so we in our industry, I'll just give you an example. A Dama gazelle. I don't know if you know what a Dama gazelle is. Do
Oh
you?
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, there's about 2,500 Dama gazelles in the whole world. Okay, but there's less than 100 of them in the wild. They're all here in Texas. Not all of them, but most of them. So when I first got started in this industry, a Dama gazelle was about $3,000 for a female. Then they went up to 35,000, and today they're about 25,000. So what influenced that? Well, what influenced it to make that rise happen is that I started aggressively teaching people about the tax deductibility of these animals, and I started really pushing on the industry to start incorporating tax strategy into what they're doing. And then we also brought a lot of new capital in. So that drove demand. When you're talking about, let's say, 2,000 animals, and there's only, let's just say, 50 of them changing hands in a month, but you have 200 people that want to buy them.
Sure.
If there's 50 available and there's only 200, or if there's 50 available and 200 people want to buy them, you can imagine what that does to the price. And so that's what drove the prices up. And what drove the prices down, that really started in 2023, post COVID. We were seeing a decline in depreciation because the big beautiful bill, or the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, it had a sunset provision where we went from 100 to 80 to 60 to 40. That decline affected people spending money on business equipment. We were also in the midst of a presidential election. And so with all of the uncertainty that was going on in the economy with inflation and all the other things, our industry saw a decline of about 20 to 30% across the board on everything. But that is now reversed. We're now seeing prices skyrocketing once again. So we're kind of back into to go mode, if you will.
Dang. Should have shot one a couple years ago.
No, I don't want to shoot him. Well, that's a lie. I absolutely do. But I'm looking at this. So, and that was for literally the past several days now. I've told several people we're having this conversation. Everybody, man, you got to let me know how it goes. And I've kind of shared some videos, and and the people that are already kind of in the industry anyway, and that have the resources to do this kind of thing, and they're like, man, that can't be right. I'm like, I'm telling you. You're going to learn something after this podcast today. All right, yeah. So we're back recording. So yeah, that was man, that took a left turn instantly. I had this whole kind of written out, not script, but talking points to go through, and we jumped into the crazy shit right off the bat. I love it.
That's wild.
Look, this industry is Tiger King is some weird shit. I mean, but the truth is that when you really get into the animal industry in the United States, it has a very, very interesting and a very colorful past. And the truth is, some very forward-thinking people in the 1950s and 60s were the ones that started this. They were thoughtful enough to say, why don't we take these animals and put them on ranches in Texas, because the landscape is very similar to where they're from. And that's what happened. And that's how this started. And then it turned into this tremendous asset for all of these zoos across America, because suddenly they had a place to get rid of all of these excess animals that they were producing. It's just very unfortunate to me that they won't embrace the relationship that they have. They won't openly acknowledge that this goes on, but yet they continue to do it. And again, I'm glad that they do it. I'm not mad at them for doing it. I don't think that they're doing anything wrong. And frankly, I think if the boards of all of these zoos knew what was going on, I think the boards would support it. But all of the employees that work within these zoos, they tend to be kind of animal rights activist type people. They're they're not really from the hunting world, so to speak. And so they would not like the fact that the animals that they're taking care of and that they're raising and that they're nurturing and pushing along, they wouldn't like that they end up at these ranches in Texas.
That's one thing I was going to ask earlier, or make a statement in, is that you people outside of Texas have no idea how big that especially the exotic wildlife industry is there.
Yeah. So in 2007, um, there was an economic impact study done by Texas A&M, and it was done at the request of the Exotic Wildlife Association, and one of our state politicians was able to get that pushed through. So at the time, they identified that the industry was contributing $1.3 billion of economic impact to the state. Now that was 19 years ago. So there's a study being done right now. I actually just filled out the survey for it last week. Look, I would not be surprised at all to find out that our economic impact is north of 10 to 20 billion dollars.
Holy smokes.
Um, well, so here's something that I think most people don't really contemplate is when they think about the exotic wildlife industry, they think about hunting. It's hard to it's hard to delineate hunting from the animals that we're talking about because we go to Africa and we hunt and we like the outdoors, and when we're thinking about a kudu, we're thinking about hunting. That's just the way our brain works. But the hunting side of this industry is not the biggest side of it. Not even close. It's just I don't know what the proportion is, but we're going to find out from this study. But our industry is driven by the wealthiest people in this state. So every big swinging dick in this state that owns a business, that owns a ranch, they have exotic wildlife on their ranches, all of them. And it's not simply because it's a Ferrari. That used to be the case. It used to be the case that they bought the animals because they were super cool. It was bragging rights. It was elite. It was something that nobody else had. That is true. That did happen for a while. Now they're hiring me to meet with their CPA to build business plans so that they can take maximum deductions on their real estate as the result of owning the animals. Now we have this elite genetic industry that is developed where you're seeing hundreds of people show up to auctions. They're buying millions upon millions of dollars of animals over a period of 2 or 3 hours. Animals are selling for $150,000 to $500,000 as individual animals, and this is not just like, it's not a casual hobby anymore. There are people that have built helicopter companies, trapping companies, veterinary companies, drug companies, equipment companies. It's just like in the hunting industry where you have optics and guns and knives and all the other things. We have all that same stuff happening within the exotic wildlife breeding industry. Customized trailers. It's just a long list of stuff that's being created specifically for this industry.
So this is like the horse industry.
It is.
So a couple of days ago, I got these numbers in. And it's a rough estimate, but the game breeding going on in South Africa right now, and this comes from two different breeders that I had a conversation with. They said they're doing between 10 and 15 billion rand a year, right, in South Africa, and it's booming, and there's nobody that can touch them. Divide that number by 18 compared to what he just told us.
Mm-hmm.
Texas has already eclipsed what's going on in South Africa right now.
Yeah.
Look, I here in Texas, we have lots of different organizations. There's deer breeding organizations, there's the Exotic Wildlife Organization, but then there's this organization called the Texas Wildlife Association, which is like pro-native wildlife, right? And I've gone and talked with them, and I've tried to explain something to them. So in 1991 in South Africa, there were only a couple of 100,000 animals left. I don't know if you knew that, but because of farming, they had decimated wildlife populations.
Yeah, the black wildebeest almost went away.
Yeah, that's correct. And so the banta buck as well. So because of farming, they decimated all these animals because they had no value. And so the Game Theft Act was put in place in 1991, and that privatized ownership of game. So if it was on your property, you could do whatever you wanted to do with it. You could do a photo safari, you could sell it for meat, you could sell it for hunts, you could do whatever. So that resulted in about $14.5 billion of investment between 91 and 2018. They took 50 million acres of marginal farmland and they converted that into breeding farms. That's what happened, right? And so they created this huge industry. But what's really interesting about that is from 1991, where they started with a couple 100,000 animals, by 2018, they had 20 million animals. So think about that for just a minute, okay? In Texas today, we have a couple 100,000 animals. So what's going to be in Texas in 20 years?
And that was exactly that was the point there, that you guys keep doing this shit and you keep, these prices keep going up and up and up because you think you can get it. Sooner or later, people are going to smarten up. And as the game is more readily available and the price starts coming down from a hunting perspective, because there's a lot of game and the ranchers can get them easily,
And demand.
it's going to be cheaper for us, or not, maybe not cheaper, but it's certainly easier for me to get on a flight to go to Houston and be there in 2 hours versus 16 hours from Atlanta to get to Joburg, right? So I'm going to Texas. I don't, right? And now there are some species that if you're a purist and there's other shit like that you're going to want to go hunt in Africa. But frankly, if you can go shoot an entire plains game package on a ranch in Texas and it's 5-star and it's only a 2-hour plane flight, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
A couple things I would like to just add to what you're talking about. I know a lot of people in South Africa. By being involved with Safari Club for all these years, I have lots of friends that are in that space. They went through a very significant change during COVID because all of the American hunting went away. So they will eventually right the ship on that, and they'll get to where their inventory is big enough. But it's no different here. If you look at a kudu today, a kudu bull that's, let's say, 55 inches, I can sell that kudu bull to a breeder for somewhere around 25 grand. But a hunting ranch can sell it to a hunter for 25 grand, maybe, right? So they're going to want to buy it from me for 17. Well, why would I sell it to them for 17 when a breeder will pay me 25? And so the hunting industry is really, really struggling to get inventory here. They don't have enough trophies to be able to feed the demand that they have. So we have the same problem here that they have in South Africa. And one of the challenges that exist here is the hunting industry can't just start raising prices. No, they can't go and raise the price of a kudu bull to hunt to 35,000 because the hunting market won't feed that. It'll feed 25, but it won't feed 35. And so for them to make margin on it, they have to buy it cheap enough where they're making money. So it's a supply and demand game, both here and in South Africa. And once the South Africans get back to where they have a surplus of inventory like they did before COVID, I think you'll see prices coming down. But until that happens, I think you're going to continue to see prices going up there. The breeding market is going up as well.
And I don't want to mention names, but so the outfitters right now, they're scrambling to get inventory, right? It's tough. And then everybody now is also freaking out about foot and mouth disease. And Limpopo province initially, put travel restrictions on game movement. Then they rescinded it. The Northwest province, they also did the same thing, then rescinded it. But people are still freaking out because they've only, it's highly transferable to game, though it's not affected the same way. But buffalo, for example, are highly susceptible, Cape Buffalo anyway. So it's driving some weird going on right now.
Yeah. Well, it's supply and demand like anything else. I personally, I hunted in South Africa. I'm more interested in the game breeding side than the hunting side there. I can do anything in Texas that I can do in South Africa. If I'm going to go back to Africa, it's going to be to Zimbabwe or Tanzania or Botswana or something like that. I don't, there's not a lot of value for me going and hunting behind a fence in South Africa.
Yeah, but I will say, from a conservation perspective, what they were able to do, like you said, circa early 1990s through today, what a great success story. What they've accomplished there is just been fantastic.
I mean, it is hand in hand with the North American recovery of wildlife. It's the model that has been implemented in South Africa and Namibia. It's remarkable how well it has worked. And I mean, look, we're implementing the exact same model in Texas. It's the exact same model. Private ownership with value causes people to invest, and those investments turn into better science, better reproduction. Just all around, everything gets better, and you end up with larger numbers, and that's where we're heading to.
Well, unless you have something with a value on it, you never get there. So you give the animals value, and now all of a sudden, all those other
The saying I learned a decade ago in South Africa: if it pays, it stays.
right.
So I was going to say this a few minutes ago, and I got sidetracked. There will be 20 million of these animals in Texas eventually. Like that's going to happen. There will be 20 million of these animals. It's South Africa is about the size of Texas, I think. I think it's a little or South Africa is a little bigger. But the fact is that, look, we're breeding these animals. They're thriving and doing well. The animals that have encountered genetic bottlenecking, they've kind of already weeded themselves out. The animals that are thriving are doing really, really well, and we're really producing a lot of numbers. And so you will see that Texas continues to breed these animals to the point where we have millions upon millions of these animals, and there is going to be an enormous hunting industry that develops here over the next 20 years. It's going to be way bigger than it is today.
So you think that like Texas will basically outprice South Africa?
That's what my thought is. Eventually, that's going to happen, that there's going to be so much game in Texas that it's not going to be affordable to go to South Africa anymore.
And you're gonna have the guys that say, why would I fly 18 hours when I can just take my plane to Texas and do the exact same thing, for basically the exact same price?
Yeah, well, Brian brought up a good point. Why would you go to Africa and hunt behind a fence when you do it in Texas? It's the same thing.
Listen,
It's the exact same thing.
and we got off topic again. Well, not off topic. It's all great. But one thing I want to ask, and this is a fantastic conversation. I love it.
Can I jump in? I want to say one thing, and just to
Please.
kind of wrap up that part on what he's saying.
Please do.
So I think this is really important, and I'm saying this because I have friends that are in Africa, and I've said this to the people that are there. I've said this to them. If South Africa doesn't figure out a way to make a clear distinction between their product and our product, they're going to have problems. But the problem is that people that are going to South Africa to hunt, they're going to hunt. They're not going there for the culture. And so why do people go to Botswana or Tanzania or Zimbabwe or even Namibia? It's because of the culture. They're paying to go see the culture. They're paying to go and visit these schools and to do great things in these schools and feed villages and do all this cool stuff. It's not just about the hunt. But when you go to South Africa, it is really just about the hunt. And so if they don't figure out a way to create some additional benefit to their product, they're going to be competing with a 5-star lodge that's 2 hours away, that has a gourmet chef. There's a bass lake that you can go catch a 10-pound bass. You can sit outside in a campfire and you can drink the best wine in the world, and you can watch the stars and stripes flying on a pole outside. And if you need to go home because there's an emergency, it's right there. And oh, by the way, you can be back at work on Monday. And so these are today, they're two very similar products, but the product in Texas doesn't have to change. But the product in South Africa, if it's going to survive long term, it's going to have to find a way to delineate itself from what's going on here in Texas. And look, it's not just Texas. These animals exist in New Mexico, Arizona, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama. I mean, these animals are starting to spread out throughout the southern United States. So, it's like you can go hunt iguanas in Florida, So it's like it's I mean, no, really, you can catch peacock bass in Florida. So the deal is it's like
From the back of my house, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like if your product is going to be selling plains game hunt behind a high fence, well, you've got a lot of competitors right here in the United States that, even though they may be more expensive from a trophy fee standpoint, are you going to go to the grocery store to get milk, or are you going to go to the convenience store that's a block away? And it's a very similar concept. It may be more expensive, but people will pay for convenience.
And I'm going to agree with you 100%. That's what I've been preaching for the last several years.
There's a 50-inch Cape Buffalo in Texas right now.
That does not surprise me.
Okay, I owned a 70-inch kudu.
Oh,
I sold the horns. I sold the horns to Brian Bailey.
Was that Mr. Wow? Was that?
No, Mr. Wow. Mr. Wow was owned by Richard Morton. That came from South Africa. So Cyclone was the name of ours.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's in Brian's museum.
Have you been there? I know we're off topic, but have you been?
I have. I haven't been since he finished the new part, but I was there to see the old part. But the deal is we are growing big ass animals in Texas. I mean, we're growing. We've already eclipsed a 50-inch sable. We have 60-inch kudu. They're not a dime a dozen, but they exist. They're becoming more and more available is not right. They're out there in the breeding world, but as time goes by, they're going to become huntable. There will be more of them to hunt. I bought today an 18-inch Dama gazelle. It's the largest Dama gazelle in the world. And so we have some big animals. And so this is a real issue. And I think some of the guys in South Africa are paying attention, and I think a lot of them are not. And I hope those that are my friends are paying attention, because they're going to have to figure something out. It's not going to stay this way for 20 years.
The friends that I have that I talk to on a regular basis, they all get it. They can see the writing on the wall. That's what I've been preaching, boys. It's coming.
So I'm gonna drive this back to the business side of things. Okay. So the thing that started this in South Africa was the Game Theft Act. The Game Theft Act ignited the market in South Africa that caused all of this investment, all of these people to go do this because there was a monetary benefit to do so. The 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act is our equivalent of the Game Theft Act. It allowed people that own businesses to take a 100% tax deduction for buying these animals. So I have a ranch. I can go out. I can buy animals, put them on my ranch. It's 100% tax deductible. I can deduct my fences, my roads, my barns, my water wells, all of my equipment, all of my employees, all of my feed, all the buggies, all my blinds, all my feeders. I can write it all off. And then I can sell the animals alive, or I can sell the animals as a hunt. I can do whatever I want. I can sell them when they're old and mature, or I can sell them when they're a year old. And so this tax provision was the gasoline on the fire that lit this thing going. And so here we are 9 years later, the industry has grown easily by 10x, and it's just now getting going. We're still in our infancy. And so we have this huge future in front of us of growth, where we're going to move from a few 100,000 animals to many, many, many millions of animals. I don't think there's anybody who can tell you exactly what that's going to look like in 20 years. But what I can tell you is it's going to look like there's a hunting ranch on every corner in every rural area of Texas, just like there is in South Africa. If you get outside of the city, there is a hunting ranch or a hunting safari place on every single corner that you pass by in South Africa. That is where we're headed. And we're not talking about just a 500-acre ranch or a 200-acre ranch or a 1,000-acre ranch. There are big, big ranches that are doing this. There's Ox Ranch, which I think is 17,000 acres. You have Star S that's 17,000 acres. There's a place out in West Texas that's 30,000 acres. There are some really, really big properties that are doing this. And so it's as fair chase as you're going to get. If you're hunting 17,000 acres on Cape Buffalo, that's fair chase. I don't care that there's a fence. It's fair chase. You can get your ass killed just as quick as you can anywhere else.
And you just hit the nail on the head when you said fair chase. That's it right there. If we can somehow, there's plenty of 200-acre places where you can go and they'll buy in shit from the auction and you go out there and whack and stack it. But a true fair chase hunt like what you're talking about, you got the whole package there. Why leave?
5-star. It's 5-star fair chase.
Everybody speaks the language too.
Yeah.
You don't get scared.
5-star fair.
When you fly in with your firearms to Houston, I can tell you what, I don't have to worry about going to SAPs and worried about who I've got to pay off to get my firearms or my suppressors through there. I'm going to Texas. Nobody gives a shit. Welcome. Come on. Can I take you for barbecue on your way to the ranch? Yes, please.
Yeah. And well, look, a lot of these ranches have runways on them. I mean, you can land right on the ranch. I mean, I think that, there's a lot of people looking at this. The Texas Wildlife Association is looking at it from the standpoint of how does this affect native game? And the answer is it affects them. It's going to affect them. Like, this is a reality. So let's figure out how to be good neighbors, because this is not going away. This is private ownership of livestock. We have the same benefit of all the laws around livestock. So getting rid of us, you can't do it. There's no easy pathway to get rid of us. We have the backing of the cattle lobby. So they can't just easily change the laws to affect private ownership of wildlife in Texas. Or private ownership of livestock in Texas. So I think anybody that's paying attention to this is going to see either my ass is in trouble because the industry that I'm a part of in South Africa is going to change dynamically. And people that are in Texas are going, holy crap, this is a great way for me to get a lot of real estate, and I can pay for it by breeding wildlife, and I can avoid paying taxes while I'm doing it. And that is what's happening. There is an enormous amount of money flowing into this by very, very wealthy people, and they are doing it because they're acquiring assets in real estate. They're doing really cool shit breeding animals. They're having a ton of fun, and it passes mustard with the IRS.
So one is an expense going to Africa, and going to Texas, which is 3 hours away, is a deduction on your taxes.
If you own the animals, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my thing is, I've been preaching it. Texas is a new thing. The Southeast in general, it's going to be there. Everybody's, not everybody, but lots of people are starting to pick up on this thing. And it's going to be affordable. Now, I don't know that, generally speaking, it's probably still not affordable to go to Texas and hunt a 50-inch kudu, comparatively speaking, like South Africa. But how many years are we looking at before it is all of a sudden?
Well, what is a kudu in South Africa right now? $7,500?
Well, it depends. So
depends.
you get to northern part of South Africa, you get to Limpopo and Mpumalanga, KZN, everything's by the inch.
Zebras are kind of easier. So a zebra in
yeah, but nobody gives a shit about a zebra.
Yeah, but zebras it's $10,000 to shoot a zebra in Florida, and in Africa it's $1,500.
Yeah, I bet the 1,000 to 1,500. Yeah.
But from a kudu perspective, I think talking about Southern Greater 55-inch kudu, your cheap outfitter's probably $7,000 is my guess.
Yeah, it's today. It's cheaper to do it in Texas.
You hit 60, and that number was, I had an opportunity to hunt a 63. It was like 17 and change, but it was in a fucking paddock, and I refused to hunt. That wasn't a hunt.
So, look, if you're going to go to South Africa and you're going to fly, in the bus, you're going to spend $3,000 on a plane ticket, $2,500, $3,000, something like that.
Listen, that's for pigs and chickens now too. Back in the old days, you could get that flight for $900 if you're willing to sacrifice. Right. If you want to go all the way up front, or maybe what's it, Delta Select, that a lot of our groups,
Comfort Plus and all that. Yeah.
Comfort Plus, that's all.
I paid $2,900.
Right.
I don't think it's less expensive today. I mean, maybe if you're shooting warthogs and impala and wildebeest, and your
entry-level plains game packages. Yeah.
That's But here's the thing. I can go to any SCI auction I can go to any regional SCI auction and I can buy a hunt with 5 or 6 animals with my daily fees for
Yeah.
$1,500. So it's like, why can I do that? Because they want to get us there. So we spend more money buying more stuff. And, it's just those hunts, people buying those hunts, those are great deals. You cannot compete with that in Texas at all. But if you're just going over there to shoot Cape Buffalo and kudu or roan or whatever the case may be, I don't think that it's any less expensive to go do that than it is to do it in Texas, because of the travel and the time that you're investing. And I don't think it's less expensive. That's just my personal opinion. I can't do the math on it exactly, but
Personally, what's kept me going back is I've got one of the tiny 10 that are I'm the only antelope species I've got left in that country, and I've got them all there is the Sharps Grace buck. I started there, over a dozen years ago, and I've been back 3 times just to hunt that little bastard. But yeah, for me, I still go. We take groups every year. It's a good time. I love bringing new people over. But what I get to see that they don't, I'm spending 6 to 9 weeks in country every year. So I get to see some of that old school heritage, some of the, there's still some clean areas, the nice areas. And we've really got into the free range, the free range hunting there and some of the really large places in the Northwest and the East Cape. That is old school, hard, kind of like an elk hunt out west. You may go hunt that kudu up in the mountain. There's no roads. You're walking in. It's taking, hours and hours and hours. You may spend 7 days and never get a shot at your kudu. But most people aren't going over there to do that.
Like we're a little different. We're there. I mean, for me personally, probably everybody here is like I'm there to hang out with my friends. Like all these outfitters.
You are different.
And PHs. Like we're friends. Like we talk to these guys all the time through WhatsApp and everything. Like I'm there to hang out with my friends. Like it's worth what we spend to go hang out with my friends, and the hunting is secondary for me. But if I was selling a hunt and you're just like, hey, you can do this and you gotta take, and it's 2 days to get there and then 2 days to get back, and it's the same price, or you can do it all and you fly into Houston and someone picks you up in a F-250 and you just go 2 hours outside of Houston for the same amount.
No, there's no question about it. Because again, you're doing the same thing. You're hunting an animal behind a high fence.
And I want to pivot this a second, and I get where you're coming from, but because we're already, running long, Brian, I want to ask you something. So look at this from call it South Florida environment, right? So I've got lots of friends that ask me to talk about this. They're seeing this now. They're seeing what you guys are doing out there, and they're thinking about getting into this business now. And I do have friends that have ranches already. They've got access deer, they've got black buck, they've got a couple of fallow deer, they've got some red deer.
Okay.
But they're not breeding these animals. This is, they're buying them on auction and then, they're having hunters come in. But most of the people I talk to are just like, hey, is there really money to be made here? And I'm like, yeah, I believe there is. But what does that look like from a South Florida environment? Can you kind of, walk us through that? What it would take to start from scratch, essentially?
Yeah. So, there's actually some examples that you can look at. So, if you look up into northeastern Florida, there's a place called White Oak. White Oak is on the St. Mary's River, right on the Georgia border. They are breeding giraffe and rhino and bongo, and I don't know if they have sable or not, but they've got Gerenuk, and I mean they've got all sorts of stuff there. They had Lord Derby there for quite a while. I don't know that they still have any there. I think they've moved them all to Texas, but they have successfully bred animals there. Bongo love Florida. Like they just love Florida. Sitatunga love Florida. Inyala love Florida. Red Lechwe love Florida. So Nile Lechwe. So there's another place which was called the Center for Tropical Ungulates. So that was owned by a guy named Brad Kelly. Brad is a very wealthy guy. Was in the tobacco industry. I think he's from Kentucky. That facility, I don't know, they probably have the largest population of bongo in the world. These are Kenyan mountain bongo. These are not the bongo you find in Cameroon. He had probably 150 anoa, which you may not know what an anoa is, but it's a little small kind of it's like a little tiny nilgai cow thing with little horns that'll really kick your ass if you're not careful. It looks like you ever seen a yellowback diker?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a yellowback diker, but they're solid brown. Um, and then he also had probably the largest population of pygmy hippos in the world, which they've been transporting all over the United States to zoos and lots of them to Texas. So he had a huge population of Nile lechwe. But if you think about it, any animal that likes hot, humid, green vegetation is going to do really, really well in Florida. I know plenty of people
Bushbuck.
that have lots. Bushbuck, they've just never done well in the United States. They are genetically bottlenecked. They just don't do well. So there's a very, very small population of bushbuck. But the deal is, Gemsbok can do really great in Florida on an area that's got lots of grass. Big wide open pasture with lots of grass. Springbok would do just great as well. So you have areas that have great thick vegetation for browsers, and you've also got areas that have big, nice grassy areas that grazers are going to do really well on. So Texas has the benefit of having kind of all the climates that you find in Africa. We have mountains and we have plains and we have coastal areas and we have, really arid, dry areas. We have swampy areas. So if you look at the climate of Florida and just think about the animals that come from Africa, they're going to do well there.
Let's talk about from a land size perspective, right? Because that's going to be the next question I get. Well, how much land do I need to get started? And to land size, if you were to suggest a species to start with from scratch, what would that be? Would it be an impala? Would it be a springbuck? Would it be a kudu? What would that look like?
Bongo.
Well, so your question's pretty broad. So
It is.
if you're thinking about getting into the breeding business, you're not trying to be in the hunting business. You're trying to be in the breeding business. First of all, you can do that on any piece of land you want. You could do it on 2 acres, or you could do it on 200,000 acres. It just depends on what species that you're going to breed, because not all species are going to do great on 2 acres.
Right.
So your question about what should I start on? Well, you're asking the drug dealer to tell you what drug to start with, and so
That may be the greatest analogy we've ever had on this podcast.
How do I get my beak wet?
So, yeah. So if I told you to start shooting up right out of the gate, you're probably not going to sign up. So where everybody starts with axis, black buck, fallow deer, scimitar works. That's where everybody starts. Everybody starts at that spot. The problem is it's very, very difficult to make any money breeding those on small property. If you have to feed them, you're probably not going to make any money. That's just the reality. But the reason that people start on them is because they're cheap. They're not expensive. And what everybody is worried about is, are they going to live? I'm buying these animals and I'm opening the trailer. They're just going to run off. Like, I'm taking my 10 grand or 20 grand and I'm just opening the door, and maybe I see it, maybe I don't. Is it going to live or is it going to die? And so your temperament for risk dictates where you start. And most people start with those species. That's just where most people start. I'll fast forward 15 years. So I live in town in a little community called Bernie, just outside San Antonio. And I live on 27 acres. So on my 27 acres, I have 25 kangaroos. I have I have a little less than 20 Dama gazelles. I have 20 Inyala. I have 3 bongo. I have a handful of tortoises. And then I've got mini cows rolling in and out as the mothers have babies. We pull the babies and we sell the babies, and then the moms go back to the ranch. So I have about $1 million of animals on 27 acres. And those animals will cash flow $500,000 a year relatively easily. without much effort. And these are all very, very calm, docile animals. Like my bongo will eat out of my hand. My Inyala will eat out of my hand. The Damas don't really eat out of my hand, but I can drive right up to them. So I can literally every night go out and I can look at all the animals. I can see who's getting ready to have a baby. I can see if somebody got hurt. I can watch these, with a fine tooth comb, and it gives me the ability to manage it very successfully. If I had 1,000 acres, and my land has great vegetation on it, lots of browse, lots of graze, I could put in Gemsbach, or I can put in sable or kudu, or lots of animals that do great just turning them out. I could do Grevy zebras or Grant zebras. It really has a lot to do with the size of real estate, but it also, you know, how big your balls are. You're taking hard-earned money and you're converting it into a four-legged animal that's wild, and you're going to let it go. So how comfortable are you just taking $1 million and just turning it out? And everybody's a little different. So it just, what I will tell you is, based on the value of these animals, it's very, very easy to have $1 million in animals, like, fast. It does not take long.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
So let me ask you a question. Last couple of winters have been some bad storms, very, very cold. How'd your animals do?
I always like to answer with a little sarcasm. It's, if you were to apply that question to people, the answer would be, well, the ones that are sleeping on the sidewalk with nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and no blanket, they don't do very good.
Sure.
But the ones that go inside and have a good meal to eat, and a blanket, and a warm home, and a dry area to stay in, well, they it's cold, but they couldn't care less.
So
And animals.
do you have somewhere for them to go that's heated that they can go to?
Yeah. So not necessarily heated. So if you think about it like this, have you guys ever hunted in, let's say, Alaska?
No.
Nope.
All right. So when you hunt in Alaska, the weather sucks. It's always cold. It's always miserable. It sucks. And if you lay on the ground in Alaska, you're going to feel the ground sucking the heat right out of your body. It feels cold. And so animals are exactly the same way. So if an animal is outside and it's cold and it's on the ground is going to be removing body heat. So the way that we solve that is by giving them bedding. If they have bedding to lay on, it's a layer of insulation that gets them up off the ground, and it just gives them a boost. It gives them enough to get through it. If it's wet and cold, let's just say it's 38 degrees and it's raining, well, that really sucks. Animals hate that more than they hate it being 18 degrees and dry. So we build shelters. We have 3-sided shelters all over our properties that are bedded down with hay. So if an animal that is accustomed to living outside when the weather gets really crappy, as long as they can get under that shelter and get dry and lay on that bedding for a little while, it gives them the ability to build their body heat enough to where they survive. They do just fine. So
Sure.
going back to your question about recent weather events, in 2021, we had that massive freeze that hit, Texas. The people that lost large number of animals were very poor stewards of their animals. They were in Houston, the animals were at the ranch. They were sitting inside in warmth, the animals were outside. We had no electricity for 18 days, which means water wells don't work. There's no heat. So your water sources are frozen. Your ponds freeze over. So even if you're going out and you're putting out an abundant amount of food and you're doing everything you can to keep the animals fed, if they have nothing to drink, they're going to die in 2 or 3 days.
Sure.
So the people that fared well in that weather are the people that worked their asses off. They're the people that were out there breaking ice in troughs to make sure the animals had water to drink. Look, I can tell you, I have it in my head. I have pictures of it. Wild animals crowding around a water trough while landowners are breaking ice in those troughs just so they can get a drink. They were just standing there waiting for the water. There were animals that died as the result of walking out on a pond, and then they fell through the ice in the middle. So the people that did very poorly were the ones that didn't do their job as a responsible party with a fence. The ones that did well were the ones that worked. And so this last little snap we had, I mean, it was a nothing. I don't know anybody that lost anything meaningful. But animals don't like cold and wet. So 38 and raining for a week, animals don't like that at all. 18 degrees and dry, they do just fine. They get through it. It's no big deal. So the sick animals and the young animals are the ones that struggle the most.
Sure.
I think a lot of that too is propagated on social media. You see the same 4 or 5 pictures all the time from 2021, 2022. Yeah, in the back of the truck, and there's 15 black buck in there, axis deer or whatever. That's the and from it looks to me it looks like it's all the same picture that's been circulated over and over again, and we've not had that problem in Florida for sure. I mean, obviously it doesn't get cold enough here. I mean, though we did have a winter this year for the first time in 20 years.
Yeah, we had a good cold snap, but it's the first time in 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Yeah. How about feed?
Look,
How about feed with those animals? How much supplemental feed do you have to give them on 27 acres?
I'm giving them all of their food.
Sure.
So it's 3% of their body weight every day. So that comes in the form of alfalfa and in the form of pellets. So I am their entire source of food. I mean, there's some browse and some graze, but I provide them all the nourishment that they need.
You ever have a couple of drinks and go try to fight a kangaroo?
Really?
Well, you say got kangaroos. I want to know.
I go to Texas one time and get drunk, and then all of a sudden they're gonna. The reason they're asking is because that might have happened once upon a time in Texas.
Not a
with
kangaroo.
Me. Oh, that's right. I got my ass kicked by an ostrich.
Yeah.
In Texas.
Oh,
Jeff.
Hey, I have the coolest ostrich video you'll ever see in your life. One of the guys that work for me absolutely got his ass kicked by an ostrich. I posted it on TikTok. He got like 1.5 million views.
Sounds familiar.
Was the ostrich's name Kevin?
No, the ostrich's name was Mike Tyson, and it whipped his ass. So
Is he still alive?
Yeah. The ostrich, no, but Brian is still alive. So he did get a broken jaw and a broken rib. So
You got off easy, pal.
I got off easy. Yeah.
all right, so I'll lay the video out. So here's Brian is a rough, tough Texas cowboy, like to the core. He's the guy you don't want to run into the bar because he's going to punch you in the face. All right, that's Brian. So here he is. He's got his Hey Dudes on. He's got a fistful of sunflower seeds, and he steps out of the buggy and he walks up to the ostrich, and the ostrich is coming. So right as it's coming, he throws the seeds in his mouth. He swings and he grabs the ostrich by the neck. I mean, it looks like Clint Eastwood's getting ready to wreck shop, right? Well, the ostrich backs up, pulls his head out from underneath him, and just makes a full charge and walks over the top of him, kicks the shit out of him. I mean, rips his shorts, rips his shirt, stands on his head. And in the meanwhile, here's Brian's wife in the background screaming, "Oh my God, no, it's going to kill him. It is going to kill him. You're right." It's the greatest video ever. Yeah. So no, the answer to your question about fighting a kangaroo, no, I'm not going to fight any kangaroos. I do have a big male. He does bow up, but he has a tendency to try to grab women more than he does men.
I mean, we've all been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might be part kangaroo.
That's great.
I'll give you $500 for that kangaroo.
Well, Brian, I haven't gotten any of, the.
Yeah, these questions are pointless.
It doesn't matter.
I know it's This is the best podcast ever.
I just, I'm not a hunter because I'm a conservation. I'm a hunter because I'm a human being, and because it is in my blood to go out and try to catch that runs around on 4 legs to eat it.
And to us, conservation is a byproduct of what we do and we like to do.
This is the best.
It's not primary. It's certainly we can serve by doing and participating in the sport we love, but we don't set out the door to like, hey, I'm conserving whitetail today, so I'm going to go out and shoot 3 doe in my backyard. No, that's not what you're thinking.
No, I'm gonna fill my freezer.
Yes. And to the farmer's point, most people don't understand the biltong market there, right? That meat is actually worth something there. Here in the States, we can't do that. I wish we could fix that because that would be fantastic. But over there,
Hey, they're making biltong right here in Birding. The South Africans have moved in, and anything I bring them, they'll turn to biltong.
What are you talking about? I got some going in my kitchen right now.
As do I.
Yeah. I'm actually next week, I'm going south. I'm going to go down to a ranch in South Texas, and we're going to shoot. I will probably shoot 8 or 10 nilgai and maybe 8 or 10 scimitar, and they'll get turned into nilgai or to biltong.
That's great.
Oh, do I send you my address? How do we get some of that?
Yeah, I'm sure I can sort that out.
Pretty forward of you, Oscar.
All right. Well, Brian, listen, we've had you for over 2 hours already, so let me just let me close this out. I've got lots of good stuff. We'll definitely have to have you back on again for sure. Even we're mobile, so we can come to you. This has been.
Oh, we gotta go to Texas.
Yeah.
You said that.
We have very few guests that are this interactive that actually, enjoy it. And like you've got so much passion in what you do. It's so easy to have a conversation with you.
And the other part of that,
Thanks.
Brian, is you want to come here and go fishing. We can catch some sailfish or whatever you want to do.
I'm in.
All right.
Count me in.
All right. That's good.
I'm a fishing, golfing, hunting. I love it all.
I'll have to leave you at the golf course, but I'll take you fishing, guaranteed.
I'd like to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Let me, if you don't mind, I will touch very briefly a little bit on the business side of what we were gonna talk about.
That's
So,
exactly where I was going with it.
yeah. So one of the cool things about where my business has evolved is that, so you have all these people that hear about all these things related to tax deductibility and these cool things about the industry, and they're very curious about it. And so they have a CPA that doesn't actually believe that what they're doing is a business. And so in the back of their mind, as they're going out and they're buying animals and they're buying a ranch and they're doing all these things, they think that their CPA is giving them all the deductions that they're supposed to be getting based on what they hear. But the truth is that's not what's happening at all, because the CPA does not buy that what they're doing is a real business. And so while they may be deducting a few things here and there, they're really not giving them the full scope of deductions. So, while I built this wildlife business where we sell $50 million a year worth of animals, and we've got this huge collection and we do all this cool stuff, I started this tax consulting business. And what's happened is people are hiring me to be their voice with their CPA. And so what I do is I step in between them and their CPA. I review all of the tax filings. I look at their depreciation schedule. I look at all the underlying assets. And what I'm discovering is in almost every one of these cases, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax, not deductions, but tax that has been left on the table that these people could recover from the IRS. And in some cases, it's many millions of dollars. And I'll give you one example of this I think it's important. So a guy called me. I went out. I don't normally go out and have face-to-face with guys when they're looking for animals, but this guy was close. And so I went with the sales guy that works for me. Anyways, the guy that I went and met with, extraordinarily successful guy, made an enormous amount of money in his career. And he bought a ranch. And over a period of 3 or 4 years, he invested like, I don't know, $5, $6, $7 million into infrastructure, roads, ponds, water wells, things like that. And during that time frame, he didn't deduct any of it. And he didn't deduct any of it because he didn't have an underlying business. Yeah, he had some animals out there and whatnot, but he didn't actually have a formal, here's my business. So I met with his CPA and his financial guy and his lawyer, and we went over kind of what he was doing. And I said, look, if he will buy some sable and some kudu and some zebra, and I'll build him a business plan. And as a result of that, he can write all of this stuff off, all of the infrastructure, all of the animals, all the labor, all the expenses of everything he's done over the last 4 years while he's been doing this. He can write all that off. And so this guy's on the phone with me. His CPA is there, his lawyer's there, and his tax guy or his financial guy's there. And he basically says, was all that true? And the CPA says, it is true. You can. And so he's sitting there going, well, why didn't you tell me that? Why didn't you tell me that I can do that? And I have this exact scenario over and over and over and over again, where you have people that have made all this investment into infrastructure. They have been breeding exotic wildlife, but their CPA never gave them the deductions that they're entitled to get. So I'm going back retroactively and fixing a lot of these things for people. Because look, if you own a $5 million ranch and there's $2 million of infrastructure, that's $700,000 of tax that you can recover with the deductions. And then if you start looking at all of the deductions that you get from the animals that you're buying, this becomes a really, really powerful tool to reduce tax liability. But more importantly, when you're selling all these offspring, they are taxed as long-term capital gains. So instead of paying active income on the revenue you generate, you're paying long-term capital gains rates of 15%. So you're getting an active deduction on the way in at 37.5, but you're only paying 15% tax on the way out. And so when you put all this together, animals are deductible, the revenue is tax favored, the infrastructure investments you make into your property are basically pre-tax money. This whole model, when you put the whole thing together, it is very difficult to outperform it with anything. It's very difficult. You have a fixed asset that's in your hand. You can actually insure the animals if you want to. So through insurance on the animals, you can make it to where you have a guaranteed risk-free investment by buying insurance. So it's just, from a tax perspective, a marketability perspective, a real estate perspective, even if you don't love exotic wildlife, this is somewhat of a no-brainer.
So I'm going to high Prince, Kentucky.
So my mind is spinning.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm gonna tell my wife and be like, our CPA told me I have to shoot this animal.
For context, his wife is a CPA.
Correct.
So here's the deal. You just tell your wife, very simple, honey, if we have a ranch and we have a viable business that we're running on the ranch, can we depreciate all of the infrastructure through a cost seg study? And she's going to tell you, well, if we have a real business, yes. So that means all of your infrastructure is tax deductible, all of it, every bit of it. But the key is you have to demonstrate that you have a bona fide business. And that's what I'm really good at. So I'm really good at helping landowners to build a written business plan, to establish operating procedures, and getting their CPA on board with all this that proves that they have a bona fide business. So if you ask your wife about cost seg, I'm sure she'll tell you, if you have a bona fide business, the answer is yes. And when she says that, just say, great, honey, because we're now in the exotic wildlife breeding.
Absolutely.
I think she'd be into it.
Listen, when I cut this thing, I'm going to have like 10 local ranchers like, hey, can we talk to that guy that you just had on your podcast?
No doubt. The amount of ranchers and outfitters that we know that are just going to be like, we need to speak to Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, locally.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something kind of cool, right? So I dropped out of high school. I didn't go to college, as I said. I've just worked my butt off, and I'm a voracious reader, and I really like studying the tax code as it relates to my life, right? But my stepdad is a CPA. My ex-wife is a CPA. I have a CPA that works for me. These people have a license to file taxes for people. And so I decided to start this consulting business just recently. So I started doing continuing education for CPAs last year, but I started this consulting company February the 1st, roughly. And so since the 1st of February, I've billed almost $400,000 in consulting fees, helping landowners to go out and get all this stuff structured correctly and to get their CPAs on board. And I give a guarantee, if their CPA does not agree to do all of it, I don't charge anything. But what it's resulted in is about $12 million of tax savings to the people that have hired me.
Since February.
And so since February, yeah.
I'm a lazy
Yeah,
son of
and
a
it's-
bitch.
I'm gonna shoot a bongo for free.
You keep going back to that shit.
I want to shoot a bongo.
Focus, Oscar. Focus.
I got priced out to go hunt a bongo in the Congo for like $50,000.
So what you're saying is you're basically almost offering your services pro bono. If there's no guarantee, if their CPA doesn't buy into it, you don't charge them.
Here's what I do. As a first step is I review everything they're doing, right? And that's the first step. If I cannot give a meaningful benefit from a tax perspective, I don't charge anything.
Sure.
If it's obvious that there's a significant benefit that's available, the next step is I get on the phone with their CPA and their lawyer. If the CPA disagrees with any of what I'm telling them or refuses to implement any of the strategies, I don't charge them anything. There's no charge. And what I can tell you is I'm batting 1,000%.
Sure.
I've never had a CPA disagree with what I'm saying, because what I'm doing is very simple. The CPA is against the wall because they've got a wealthy, powerful client saying, I want you to take all these deductions. But the CPA is like, you don't have a real business.
Right.
This is a hobby. You're just screwing around with this. And I say to the CPA, look, you hand them over to me. I'm going to develop a business plan. We're going to make a written business plan. It's going to be 100 pages long. It's going to cover the whole industry. It's going to cover everything they're doing on the ranch, the appreciation of the real estate, the appreciation of the infrastructure, the breeding of the animals, where they're going to sell the animals. It's going to tell the whole story. And I'm going to give you that book. And once you have that book in your hand, are you willing to file this as a bona fide business? And the answer is, thank you for doing that.
Sure.
I can sleep at night now knowing that I have the ability to defend my client if they get audited. Before, they're commingling funds, they're paying for animals out of a construction company. One day it's cash. They're, all these things you're not supposed to do. What I do is I train landowners to run their wildlife business as a business. Stop running it like a hobby, because if you run it like a hobby, it is a hobby. Run it like a business. And so I impose discipline with these people to make sure that they are doing what they have to do to prevent their deductions from being disallowed. And so, and again, it's not hard to make money doing this if you structure it correctly and you make the proper investments. And so my company, I started in 2016. I had 270 acres. Since 2016, we've done more than 300 million in revenue. I've got 12,000 acres of real estate and about $130 million in assets. And we've done every single bit of that by breeding and selling exotic wildlife. That's our only stream of revenue.
That's incredible.
So it's not hard to do this if you behave like a business person. But if you behave like it's a hobby, the IRS is never going to allow you to do it. They're going to disallow it.
Hence the nearly year-long audit I just went through. Yeah. Oh, shit. Brian, that's fantastic. We definitely got to have Brian back on.
Sure.
100%.
I can't wait to shoot a Kentucky Zitatunga.
You know where the wheels are turning, right?
Correct.
So I've got a fairly large farm in Kentucky, and for years I'm thinking, let's do something more with it. And I'm spending, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars on improvements and this and that. And what can we do? And should I high fence it? Should I do this and that? I'm thinking, fucking right, I'm gonna high fence that fucker now.
The deer. Bongos.
With the problem with the Kentucky, though, I guess is that it gets really cold there.
Bongos will survive.
You just need to find what animals you can.
I currently have a client in Indiana that we're building all of his infrastructure for him. He does have heated barns, and with heated barns, he'll be able to raise anything. He's building, fully enclosed heated barns that the animals can go in during the winter. I have clients in Michigan, South Carolina, North Carolina. I think that's pretty much it as far as north. But if you build the right infrastructure, you can really raise anything. But in Kentucky, you can raise camels. You can raise Highland cattle. You can raise all sorts of stuff in order to take advantage of the deductions that are available to you. Ibex, Nubian ibex, Markhor, Mouflon sheep. I mean, you can raise any of the sheep and goat species.
Don't
in
look at me. You
Kentucky.
just
They'll
want to
be just
shoot him.
fine.
I'm looking at.
No, I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help you tax wise.
Like I said, I showed it was
Hey, have you ever heard of White Elk Ranch
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
in Nebraska?
Yeah.
A guy named Tad Puckett. Yeah, so he raises bighorn sheep, Dall sheep, mountain goat, Markhor. He raises all sorts of stuff in Nebraska.
All right. Well, let's sign off then. So, are you guys done with your sounds now?
Yeah,
I wanted to shoot a bongo for them.
sure. Wow, we hadn't heard that before tonight.
Jesus Christ.
Dude, I've wanted
All
to shoot
right.
a bongo for so long, dude.
Can I sign off now, for Christ's sakes?
I want to shoot a Houston raised bongo that came from Miami.
Good talk. Brian, it has been an absolute pleasure. Wow, that was only two. Appreciate the shit out of it, and we look forward to seeing you again. Good luck in whatever you do moving forward. I mean, you've definitely got a niche there that is fucking unbelievable. I mean, I really think our viewership is going to flock to that. And, for everybody else out there, till next time, live free, hunt hard, and keep chasing that adventure.